Yakuza 0 is my favorite game from last year. As such, I plan to fully cover the game in its entirety, which will mean I will be spoiling major events in the story. If you haven't played it, I implore you to pick it up. It's one of the best games of this generation. You won't regret it. Let's begin. Yakuza 0 is an open-world RPG beat-em-up and serves as the prequel to the first Yakuza that was released on December 8th, 2005 in Japan and December 5th, 2006 in the US. As such, you do not need to know anything about the other games to jump into this one, except a few obscure references from the past titles that I will get into later. If the huge library of games in this series has made it hard for you to pick it up in the past, then this is the perfect place to start at. Now that we have that out of the way, on with the review. I'll start at Chapter 1. The game starts off with our protagonist Kazuma Kiryu just beating some poor dude up like a crazy beating. Completely one-sided match. Turns out the reason Kiryu here was beating up this poor lad was to collect on a debt for a loan shark, and after handing the money to the loan shark offers him a job, but Kiryu refuses and walks off. There are three types of cutscenes in this game. There are the really polished ones, which are movie tier, then there are the in-game ones, which while presented really well are just the in-game models, and then there are these ones, which are kinda in between both of them. Because while they aren't nearly as unpolished as the in-game ones, the cutscenes are presented in still image format and the characters don't really move their lips. But it is stylized with thick shading, so it does sell some moments really well. From there, we are introduced to the setting of Kamurocho while the intro track plays in the background. The setting of the Yakuza games have always been one of the series' greatest strengths. They're always very detailed and lively and kind of have like a spirit of their own. They're really fun to explore. They're not really very huge, like say in GTA, but they are densely packed to keep things entertaining. There's always something to do every, a couple walks away. We don't have cars in this game. All you do is walk, for a good reason. There's a reason why Kamurocho's in every single Yakuza game. One, to save money, but also because it is the best example of the team's design philosophy, to create a densely packed district instead of an empty world. An environment that's an inch wide but a mile deep, instead of an environment that's a mile wide but an inch deep. Before we move on, I want to tackle what has been censored in this game, or rather, replaced. The intro song that is playing during the setting of Kamurocho is actually a US original song for that track. In the Japanese version, it was actually a completely different track. But it didn't get brought over not because it was censored, but rather because Japan has some very strict copyright laws which don't let the US release of the game really have that song without paying a heavy price. And I guess Sega just really didn't want to hit that. But this is a rather small issue because both tracks are great. You're not doing yourself a disservice by picking up either version unless you don't understand Japanese or English, which in that case you are doing yourself a disservice. Pick up the version which you actually understand. Kiryu's violent beating at the start of this game was a bang-up way to introduce his character as this brutal individual, but his conversation with the loan shark also paints him as a stoic figure, two major assets of his personality in this game. In the previous games, like in Yakuza 1, Kiryu had an even more stoic nature to him, but given that he's younger in this one, he's a bit more of a punk here, and this intro gets that across in a memorable fashion. Beating a dude up. Now Kiryu is waiting for a good friend to go hit the town with, but he's late, so he decides to walk around town until he comes across some thugs shaking down a poor civilian on his family's property, the Dojima family. So Kiryu goes over to educate them, but they start to get a bit aggressive, so it's time for a combat tutorial. The tutorial basically goes over what's the punch button, what's the kick button, a few combos, some grabs, but let me tell you what the brawler style's like. Brawler combat works with light attacks and heavy attacks. You can perform a string of 4 light attacks and put a heavy attack in between each one, giving you different results, like with square triangle or square square triangle. These different variations have their uses, like square triangle is good for knocking down enemies, while square square triangle is good for staggering them so you can grab them and throw them to the ground. You can grab, dodge, and block enemies, and a more efficient way to do that is through targeting. When you target someone, you don't have a big target symbol on them, you just face them for the entire time you're targeting them, so that your punches can be more efficient. You don't end up punching thin air, for example, or dodging right in front of the enemy. Other than that, the only other move you have is a taunt, which all good fighting games need. And by fighting games, I mean like 3D fighting games, not 2D fighting games, or just competitive fighting games, though taunts there are pretty cool too. I think you should add them in every fighting game. I don't think a fighting game should not have taunts. Every game should have taunts. Chess should have taunts. You will get other moves as you progress throughout the game, like this drop kick or this grab after a combo, but that's in the upgrade wheel and that will be coming up in the next tutorial, so I'll explain it there. Same with heat actions. To round off the combat, it feels great. Like you're slapping enemies across the face, you're like punching the air out of them, like it's just crazy. And every time you land a heavy attack on an enemy, money just comes bursting out of them. This is the bubble era in Japan where everyone was really rich. So everyone has like $1 million bills in their pockets, and when you punch them really hard, they just fly off. It's amazing. Like, it's not actually dollar bills, it's yen, because it's Japan and all that, but money's money. It works, it works. Overall, Yakuza 0 has really good game feel. The only things I really have to complain about are grabs. Not because grabs don't feel good to do, because when you grab an enemy and you like punch them, or super punch them, or just grab them, it's more that when you miss a grab, you're stuck in this anime. Kiryu is just stuck in an animation of him like failing the grab, and you're just kind of stuck there. And enemies are very dodgy. And another thing about the game is that enemies are terrible people, just like in real life. So while some enemies will have build up to attack, some enemies will just attack you without any prompting, like real people. So it can get kind of annoying when you're grabbing someone and they'll just move out of the way. You're just kind of stuck in that animation, and it's just terrible. Overall, this isn't that terrible. It's not as bad as in Yakuza 1 when an enemy sidestepped you, because this time you're actually versatile enough to deal with it, because you have directional attacks, which, well, after 11 games? Yeah, that's a good addition to have, especially when it was introduced in the second game. So while some enemies do have annoying movesets, you can destroy them, so it is completely fine. I have zero problem with it. Besides your normal combat, you can also pick up stuff around the area to beat enemies up with. This is a street fight, you're not going to play fair, so you can pick up a cone and beat someone up with it, and it's great. Kiryu's brawler style is fun to play as for the great game feel and the involved mechanics with it, that while not too complicated, they aren't too simple to bore you. Let's move on with the story. After beating up those reckless thugs, Nishiki finally shows up, the good friend Kiryu's been waiting for this whole time.
おめえいつまで経っても来ねえから待ち合わせすっぽかされたかと思ったよ。
Nishiki's a bit of a polar opposite from Kiryu. He's a bit of a suave ladies man who likes to keep up appearances, while Kiryu couldn't really care about that and is a bit rough. So yeah, they would make great friends. Now that they're together, Kiryu and Nishiki go out to get some drinks and sing their heart outs, but before they can get to their bar, some drunks are blocking the way, so you know what to do. Put them all on lockdown. It's time for another combat tutorial. This is where the game introduces you to the concept of heat, one of the major pillars of Yakuza's combat system. What exactly is heat? Well, the way it works is that for every good thing you do in combat, like hitting your opponent, dodging at the right time, or taunting without getting hit, a heat gauge will fill up. In previous games, this would be a single gauge, but in Zero it has a unique variation with 3 gauges, so you better watch out. The gauges represent how fast you attack. On the first gauge, you're very slow, on the second gauge, you're medium, and on the third stage, you are super fast. It's not a stage, it's a gear. So you constantly want to be doing good in combat so you can be as fast and as powerful as possible. But then again, that's not all the heat gauge can do. Heat can also give you access to heat actions. Heat actions are contextual attacks that you can perform once you have your heat gauge filled up to the second or third gauge. Some examples of heat actions would be unleashing a brutal beatdown to some poor fool, or pouring salt in a poor soul's eyes. What a madman! There are a ton of different heat actions for any kind of situation, and they're all quick, brutal, and definitely out there. I love them and they keep combat engaging. Doing heat actions actually decreases your bar. So will you perform a heat action that will cause major damage but will deplete your bar, which in the future will make your attack slower? That type of decision making keeps combat interesting and in the moment. That is the heat system in Yakuza. Now let's get back to the story. Once you convince the drunks to move out of the way, another drunk man comes up to tell you about the upgrade system. The upgrade system is a spear grid with nodes, and you buy nodes to gain new moves, but some of the spear grid is locked, and the only way to unlock it is by meeting certain conditions. One of my favorite things about the Yakuza series is the sense of progression with its upgrade system, because you start off as this small health bar boy who has a couple moves in his arsenal, to the end of the game where you're just throwing dudes off of buildings. Well, you don't need an upgrade for that, but you have a bunch of other moves that you acquire from the upgrade system, plus this huge health bar. It really shows how far you've come in the 60 hours you've played the game. So after that explanation of the upgrade system, Kiryu and Nishiki finally get to hit that karaoke bar and sing their heart outs. And here we are introduced to the karaoke minigame. These type of minigames aren't forced on you during the main story, but this one is, but you can skip it. But you shouldn't. The karaoke minigame is alright. It's a rhythm game, but it could use a bit more feedback on those button prompts. But none of that matters because what carries it is the great song selection and the phenomenal presentation. The only issue is that there isn't more of it. So after pouring their heart outs in karaoke, Kiryu and Nishiki decide to simmer back a bit, take a few drinks, and then just talk. And it's here where we get a bit of insight into their relationship. As it turns out, Kiryu and Nishiki are orphans. They've never met their parents, but they've always found a father figure in Fuma, their adoptive father who runs the Sunflower Orphanage. This location carries a bit more significance in Yakuza 1's story, but in this story it still holds a huge amount of importance given that this is the place where Kiryu and Nishiki develop their relationship along with their relationship to Fuma, plus it is a place that they care very deeply about. Another thing we learn here is guys being dudes, and Yakuza 0 delivers on that. With some great chemistry between Kiryu and Nishiki and just a lot of good writing that shows just how dudes they are. With a lot of like small insults they'll throw at each other without really caring because, well, how can you be a friend to someone if you're not willing to talk crap about them? But beneath all this smack talk, there is heart and compassion between them. The type that if given the chance, they would die for their bro, just like any good bro would. After participating in open mic night, Nishiki is rather hungry, so the two dudes decide to hit up their favorite ramen shop and Kiryu sits there without eating any noodles.
おい、なんだよ。全然食ってねえじゃんか。
だからもう食えねえって言ったろ。大盛りなんか頼みやがって。
A full stomach isn't going to be Kiryu's worst problem because the dude he beat up at the beginning of the game shows up dead on the TV. So, what are you gonna do about that? Kiryu is immediately shook by this because the TV announcer says that the guy was shot with a gun. And as we saw at the beginning of the game, Kiryu didn't shoot the guy, he simply beat him up, so there's no way Kiryu could have killed this guy. Not long after, Kiryu's pager receives a beep, so he hits up the nearest payphone to see who it is, and it's the lieutenants of the Dojima family waiting for him at his office. Yikes. Keep in mind, Kiryu is still just a rookie in the Yakuza game, he's only been here for 2 to 3 years, so for him to mess up this bad, for the lieutenants to call him to have a talk with him, there's gonna be punishment. So Kiryu decides to show up to the office and the 3 lieutenants are standing, sitting before him. 3 pillars of the Dojima family before him ready to ridicule him. Kuze.
ずいぶん待たしてくれるじゃねえか。偉くなったもんだな。おう、キリ。
Shibusawa.
昼間から当時は上の幹部がガン首揃えてお前を呼び出してあるよ。わかるよな。
And Awano.
やっぱりてめえか。こりゃゴルどころじゃなくなっちまったな。なあ、クゼの兄貴。
Just from their introductions, we can tell what type of people they are. Kuze seems to be the head honcho of the lieutenants, while Awano is a bit more laid back. Shibusawa's a bit more straightforward and narrow, yet very calculating. And it's these people Kiryu has to answer to for his mistakes, whether it was his fault or not. The lieutenants are already caught up on the situation because the loan shark you were working for ratted you out. Ouch, man. Kiryu pleads with the lieutenants that he wasn't the one that killed the man because the man was shot and he didn't have a gun, but the lieutenants don't believe him, and they start discussing the politics of the murder and the location of the said murder, which Kiryu and the audience really have no idea what they're talking about. So Kuze tells the other lieutenants to leave the room so that he can have a private session with Kiryu, so he can fill him in on the importance of the murder and the location of said murder. The land where the man died is a land which Dojima himself, the big man of the family, told his lieutenants to acquire for him at any cost. And now that a man died there, the place is a bit problematic and they can't actually get to it that easily, so now Kiryu has to pay the price. By the end of the day, Kiryu needs to turn himself into the cops and cut off his own pinky finger and leave it at Kuze's office. Traditional Yakuza punishment. And to make matters worse, Dojima is offering the captain's spot of his family to whichever one of the lieutenants actually manages to acquire the land. Now the lieutenants are pretty high up on the family, but the captain's spot is even higher. It is the right-hand man of Dojima himself, and the person filling that spot at the very moment is Kazuma, but he's in jail. So the lieutenants actually have a chance to replace Kazuma, Kiryu's foster father, and become captain of the Dojima family. Kiryu is not going to let anyone do his own father dirty over a murder he didn't commit, yet he can't do anything about it because he's a low-ranking member of the Yakuza, and Yakuza etiquette does not allow him to fight a higher-ranking member of the Yakuza like the lieutenants. So all he can do now is hunt down the loan shark which ratted him out and see if he has any answers on who framed him. So Kiryu leaves the Dojima office in order to go hunt down that loan shark and beat some answers out of him, but before he can get there, he is interrupted by a familiar face. By a familiar voice. Now the foreigner doesn't want to tell Kiryu how to invest in himself, but rather wants Kiryu's help in a dangerous pickle he and his friend, the fisting artist, have gotten themselves into. But through this pickle, Kiryu learns the rush style of combat. Everything about the rush style is geared towards speed. Your attacks are the fastest of all the styles, just very quick. It's a boxing style, and you have 3 dodges, so in case an enemy is actually about to attack, you can immediately get out of there quickly. Blocking is somewhat different in style because you don't actually block hits. Instead, when you press the block button, you instead bob and weave, so you can dodge attacks. When an enemy attacks you, you press the dodge button and you bob and weave. You bob, 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 bob. Given that Rush is the fastest of the combat styles, it is also the weakest in attack power. You might attack an enemy and they won't flinch, even if they flinch when you hit them with a brawler combo or a style I'll get into later. Some of the same rules with brawler combat also apply here with your square and triangle combos and finisher combos, so what you learn there, apply it here as well. Rush was a great addition to this game. Like the way you just slip around the battlefield like a slippery snake, and then you get behind someone and you start punishing them with really precise hits. Honestly, it's really great. But I do have somewhat of a weird issue with it, and it's somewhat in relationship to the whole game. In Rush combat, you can't grab enemies or objects around the battlefield to beat up enemies with, and this is a good thing because it actually forces you to use the brawler combat if you want to do things like that. The only problem is now that they don't really do anything with the circle button. Now there is an upgrade you can get in the Rush combat where you can just counter someone and they can show up behind you, so you can get behind them and you can hit them in the back. But if you don't have that upgrade, the only thing the O button does, the circle button, the O button, is that you just kind of deliver a weak kick. It's oh, I kicked. You really couldn't have done anything more interesting.
The rush combat really isn't as well balanced as, say, the brawler combat, and this would be an issue if rush combat was the only style Kiryu has, but it isn't. It's one of the 3 styles he has. So in limiting this one style so that the other styles can have some relevance in certain areas is actually a great thing, because the rush style can't go nearly as fast or be nearly as precise and satisfying to use if they try to, I don't know, round it all off and like just limit some of these things so that it can be a well balanced style. It'll kind of dilute what's so special about rush. So overall, rush is good. Now let's get back to the story. So after helping them out with their pickle, the foreigner introduces you to his friend, the fisting artist, and this here introduces us to one of the many concepts of the game, trainers. Now trainers are people that teaches you moves for your combat styles, like the fisting artist teaches you moves for rush, while the foreigner teaches you moves for brawler. Now I'll get more into specifics on how their training is, but basically you have to search them out and do their training to learn new moves for your styles, but you have to have those styles unlocked in the upgrade tree before you actually have the training available for them. So after that fiasco, you finally reach the building of the Loan Shark, and here you get your first taste of a beat 'em up level. You have to traverse 2 rooms full of enemies and objects and see how you can beat them all up. So Yakuza is split up between open world exploration, and usually in that section you beat up enemies through random encounters. But sometimes the game will pull you out into levels where you have to just beat up enemies to progress, and this is one of those levels. It's not a very long level, but that's fine because this serves just as a taster for what's to come and get you used to these type of situations. So after beating up goon after goon, you finally come face to face with the lone shark who framed you. The shark has a gun pointed at Kiryu, but after witnessing his confident stride, the lone shark is immediately disarmed. He informs Kiryu that he really doesn't know anything about a frame and he was only following orders from higher up. Now who are those higher ups? Well, they show up, it's Kuze. Kuze isn't too happy that you've disobeyed a direct order from him, but he's willing to let it slide as long as Kiryu does him one favor. Spy on Kazuma, his foster father, in order to get information about the empty lot, which could lead to Kuze becoming the next captain of the Dojima family. If Kiryu does right on this, Kuze promises him a high position in the Dojima family once he becomes captain, and the actual killer of the man in the empty lot. Kiryu flat out rejects his offer and vows to never align with him because it would go against his very nature as a Yakuza and would disrespect the people he actually looks up to. This action isn't without its repercussions because Kuze knows everything about Kiryu's past, from the orphanage to Kazuma. Despite this, Kiryu leaves Kuze and is immediately called up by Nishiki, who informs him that he should probably talk with Kashiwagi about this, Kazuma's right-hand man and a reliable figure in a time of need. Kiryu arrives at the Kazuma office and finds Kashiwagi, one of the members with the most experience in the Yakuza, a man who has earned the title of the right-hand man of Kazuma, slurping on some noodles.
すいません、柏木さん。お手間かけさせるような真似しちまって。
Kashiwagi is happy to see Kiryu safe and already knows that Kuze asked Kiryu to betray Kazuma just from his experience with him. But he isn't really familiar with everything else that's happened to Kiryu, so Kiryu fills everyone in. Given an understanding of Kiryu's situation, Kashiwagi decides to elaborate on why the empty lot is so important. Basically, Dojima has been buying up all of the properties in a certain pleasure district so he could bundle it all together and sell it to the highest bidder. The only problem with this plan is the empty lot because the owner of it is missing, so they can't actually buy the land off of him. So this would be fine if Kiryu didn't get framed for murdering a guy there, because now there's a bunch of attention on that lot, so if Dojima tried to sell all that land to the highest bidder, the owner might actually show up and sue them because there's actually attention on the lot, which complicates everything. The empty lot by itself really wouldn't be anything special, but the fact that it's connected to this exact pleasure district makes it an important piece of real estate that Dojima wants control of. It is also a possibility that if any of the lieutenants actually manage to get the empty lot for Dojima, that Kazuma might not just lose his captain position, but might straight up be kicked out of the family altogether. Despite this, they can't really do anything about their situation because a lower ranked member of the Yakuza can't do anything to a higher ranked member of the Yakuza. If they do so, there will be grave consequences. Given the situation that Kiryu is in, he decides that the only way to proceed forward is to quit the Yakuza so that he can hunt down Kuze without any repercussions. Nishiki is immediately against the plan, given the fact that even if he does go up to Dojima and ask to leave the Yakuza, they might just kill him on the spot, and Kiryu's like, maybe they will. Kashiwagi advises Kiryu to calm down and think of another way to solve this issue, but Kiryu is so wrapped up in his own foolishness that he denies even his advice.
おめえなめたこと言ってんじゃねえぞ。あ？俺の言うことが聞けねえのか？ああ、桐生！
But Kashiwagi isn't going to stand for it. Kiryu doesn't want to hurt or disappoint the people he cares about, but he just has a strong need to do what he has to do. He will do anything to protect Kazuma, his foster father, even give his life. Kiryu leaves with Nishiki to go to the Dojima office while Kashiwagi is left immensely disappointed by Kiryu's foolishness. While on the way to the Dojima office, Kiryu and Nishiki both reflect and reminisce on how they became Yakuza. A moment to relax and take comfort in one's company before it all goes to hell.
施設上がりの人間はなあ、今お前何考えてた？
何もぼーっとしてただけだ。
おらよ、いつだったかおやっさんに殴られていた時のことを思い出してた。俺たちがこの道に入る前の晩だったよな、確か。てっきりお前も同じこと思い出してるもんだと思ってたよ。
やっぱりおめえにはかなわねえな、兄弟。
Kiryu arrives at the Dojima office and the worst possible scenario is there, Kuze and a bunch of thugs. Kuze has no intention of letting Kiryu visit Dojima and plans to kill him, but he does give him one last chance to join him and betray Kazuma. But Kiryu refuses. Kiryu's all like, you're just gonna kill a family member. And Kuze's all like, you ain't no family. And then Kiryu's like, okay then.
何？
Despite not being able to see Dojima, Kiryu still got exactly what he wanted. Kiryu isn't part of the Yakuza anymore, which gives him free reign to just rail on Kuze all he wants, but before he can do that, he has to beat up all the goons he brought with him, and thus begins the first beat 'em up level of Yakuza 0. And man, ooh boy, this is some good stuff.
いつでもいいぜ。
The hype in this level is immense. You start off in a room with like a million dudes and you just get to beat all of them up. You got vases, you got couches, and you got some rockin' music playing in the background. With the huge density of dudes that you're just beating up, like money is just flying everywhere. It is a spectacle to behold. It's actually pretty challenging your first time through, but my footage is in New Game Plus, so I am doing a bit better than most. My only issue with the level is that you don't have all of your fighting styles yet, which is, no, kind of lame. You beat up everyone in the room and just slam a boy through the door. A few more guys are waiting to get beat up, but watch out. We have a couch master, a challenging adversary. If you have no heat. Now that slimy punk that kicked you in the face when you first entered the office will keep coming back to fight you, but you just have to keep knocking him down like a bunch of bowling pins. You know, like boom, boom, boom. It's through this punk that we are introduced to one of Yakuza's series staples, quick time events. a hated gaming icon, but to be honest, in Yakuza, they're not so bad. They're fair and the events are quick, brutal, and mix well into gameplay. Sometimes they might mess it up, but I'll get to that later. But you have to love those transitions though. As you ascend up the office, beating up worthless fools along the way, you reach the locked door. Dang, we came up here for nothing. What now? To Kiryu? The answer is simple. Jump. Now we out here beating up some dudes with pissy hands, but then that slimy punk returns with a knife to mess up our boy Kiryu. Ooh, what a slimy eel. The slimy punk is actually somewhat difficult with a knife because you can't block that. So if you're not careful, this might just spell out game over for you. But if you manage to beat him, Kiryu makes sure that he does not get up again. So after running that gauntlet, you are finally face to face with Kuze. Kuze somewhat respects that Kiryu was actually able to make it to him and is coming to actually be somewhat impressed with the boy. But he ain't gonna let him leave alive because now it's his turn in the ring.
下にいた役立たずどものせいで勘違いさせてまったらしいが、堂島を甘く見るなよ、キリ。お前はもうこの手で直接やらねえと気が済まね
いつまで能がきたるてんだ。さっさとかかってこい。
え。あ？
かかってこねえならこっちから行くぜ。
Is a fantastic boss to start the game off with. His music theme is phenomenal. It is a straight up banger! He's got a distinct and challenging fighting style. He's got quite a few different combos. He has a jab to throw you off balance, and he's got a grab of sorts you really gotta watch out for. You have to play it careful with this guy. A real challenge as long as you're not a New Game Plus like I am, where you just demolish his life bar in like 30 seconds, leading up to his amazingly directed QT transition into heat mode. Just like Kiryu, boss fights also have their own sense of heat, but what exactly does that mean for the fight itself? It means that the boss now has a magnificent aura like you do when your heat gauge is full, and he's going to flinch less if you attack him from the front, but then again, this is somewhat inconsistent. A flaw with Yakuza's combat is that it's not exactly as precise as others in the genre. It's somewhat random, a bit like RNG if one of your attacks will make a boss flinch, so you should be a bit more careful so that you don't end up in a sticky situation. Also, their attacks track like crazy, so don't dodge their first punch in a combo because their second or third punch will just circle around to hit you in the face. Punching them in the back is the best way to go about it, but watch out because they might turn around while punching and boy, they ain't gonna flinch, get out! So overall, this is easily the best first fight in any of the Yakuza games. Truly phenomenal. And boy, the game definitely gets its worth of the fight. Oh baby, you'll understand what I mean later. After beating up Kuze, the other lieutenants show up along with the big man himself, Dojima. Kiryu swears to Dojima that he did not kill anybody, but that he did bring unwanted attention to the family, so he's ready to be kicked out of said family. Kuze is pissed though, and he's still ready to fight Kiryu, and Dojima is all like, "What, you gonna murder civilian?" Kuze tries to worm his way out of the situation by lying, but the other lieutenants snitch on him, so Kuze just ends up looking like a jackass in front of his own boss. For all the problems Kuze has caused, he has to pay the ultimate price, his own pinky finger. Kuze is now humiliated, and with one less finger, he looks like Kiryu with such an intense rage as he sees that he still has his fingers intact. The finger he told him to cut off, and now he is the one who actually pays the price, instead of the rookie. Despite Kuze kicking Kiryu out of the Yakuza without Dojima's permission, Dojima still needs to honor that order because Kuze is one of his lieutenants. So, Dojima expels Kiryu from his family. Kiryu is at first overjoyed that he managed to accomplish his goal, but as it soon turns out, he didn't really accomplish anything because now that he's out of the Yakuza, anything that he did wrong falls on Kazuma's shoulders. Kiryu has failed to protect his foster father, and so Kiryu's hopes and dreams are crushed right then and there.
どうすればいいんだ。じゃあ俺はどうすればいいんだ。
Kiryu returns to Kamurocho sad and depressed, and he lies there, moping in the rain, until a mysterious stranger named Tachibana comes by and invites him to his apartment. Strange. And so, chapter 1 ends here. The biggest flaw with this chapter is the immense amount of tutorials, which is kinda sucky, but the story is so engaging and well presented in this chapter that for first time playthroughs, this isn't even going to be an issue. And the chapter ends on a banger of a beat 'em up level and an amazing boss fight. While they could have toned down the tutorials somewhat, I still say this is a good start to Yakuza 0. And now I will move on to chapter 2. The chapter begins with Kiryu taking a shower. Here we get to see Kiryu's incomplete tattoo, and he's reflecting on the events that have transpired today. Once Kiryu is done bathing and comes out in his bathrobe, Tachibana invites him to eat with him, but Kiryu refuses because it is a stranger's food. After all, Kiryu doesn't know what's in the food. He could be poisoned. Tachibana is really doubling down on trying to make sure that Kiryu doesn't think he's a shady guy. He first tells him he has a real estate business and he has his best interests in mind, but Kiryu is still suspicious. Tachibana then tells Kiryu about his phantom pain, and Kiryu's rather disinterested. Tachibana then goes on to explain that he knows about Sunflower Orphanage, he knows Kiryu and Nishiki are orphan brothers, and he knows that Kazuma is in danger right now and needs help. Tachibana pretty much knows everything about Kiryu, and that's got Kiryu a bit spooked. And now Kiryu wants to know why Tachibana would have those things with him. Why would he want to have that type of information with him? What's his goal here? Tachibana wants the empty lot, and he wants Kiryu's help in order to get it. If Kiryu accepts his offer, he is willing to use his information network to hunt down the actual killer of the man in the empty lot. Kiryu refuses, however, because while the offer is very good, it's too good, and in this town, if something's too good, they're probably lying and it's bad business, so you better get out of there. So sadly, they do not team up. Despite both of them wanting to protect Kazuma, Kiryu leaves. However, before Kiryu completely leaves, he does take Tachibana's business card with him because business cards are key. Kiryu heads over to the Kazuma office, but does not enter because he's not Yakuza anymore. It would be improper for him to do so. Kashiwagi looks down upon him with a menacing and disappointed scowl. Nishiki comes out and is surprised that Kiryu's even alive, and wants him to come in so he can actually explain the situation, but Kiryu is hell-bent on not entering so that he could at least pay the price for what he's done. Kiryu invites Nishiki to come over to his apartment so that he can actually fill him in on what's going on. Kiryu goes to meet up with Nishiki, but before he can do that, he is interrupted by a large man called Mr. Shakedown. It's time for an analysis explanation. One important change that Yakuza 0 brings to the table is that you make a lot of money. Ridiculous money. Stupid money. It's the bubble era, so money is everywhere. So like what might have taken a whole playthrough of a previous game to earn, you can earn in just a couple random encounters. But to balance this out, they made an individual that hunts you down, and that individual is Mr. Shakedown. These are huge dudes that will challenge you to a fight, and if they win, they will take all of your money, and I mean all of it, and the only way you can get it back is to fight them again and win. But if you win, you get to take all of their money. They're a very tough fight because despite their slow attack patterns, they deal huge damage if they hit you, and none of your attacks stagger them, so they will never flinch from one of your attacks, so you can't rely on them. This is a fight you have to be very patient with, because if you're not and you make a stupid mistake, you'll end up bankrupt. Also, every time you beat them, they'll come back even stronger than before, so the difficulty elevates as you go along the game. They're a great way of making money though, so I do recommend investing in them, but let's get back to the story. Kiryu finally arrives at his apartment and meets up with Nishiki and pretty much fills him in on everything that's happened so far. Nishiki, now knowing what the situation is, decides to inform Kiryu that the loan shark which could have framed him actually was shot dead hours ago. Yakuza is cutting down any loose ends which might lead Kiryu to the actual killer. Given this newfound quandary to solve, Kiryu mentions to Nishiki his encounter with Tachibana Real Estate, which Nishiki surprisingly actually knows quite a bit about. Nishiki informs us that Tachibana Real Estate actually has quite a horrifying reputation behind it. The real estate game in Kamurocho is packed super tight and most of the businesses are owned by Yakuza, but somehow this real estate company has managed to get properties on their own. No matter how successful or unsuccessful the property is, they'll have it in days. They've even fought Yakuza before, and they've done it easily. They're a dangerous group, so that even the Tojo clan is trying to shut them down because they're actually a threat. Tachibana has quite the reputation behind him, but there really isn't that much known about him, so Nishiki wants to go with Kiryu to figure out some information about him and see which side he's on. But Kiryu tells Nishiki that he'll just figure out the information alone, because if they work together, they'll attract way too much attention and they might actually be hunted down by Kuze. So Nishiki leaves and Kiryu goes to bed. Then he wakes up ready to gather up some information about Tachibana. This section of the game is a bit tricky because you don't have a giant pink marker telling you where to go. It's not that hard to figure out, but you just have to pay attention to the names of locations and whatnot in order to go there. As you're hunting down information, you're bound to come across a lady challenging a very fat man to a fight over a debt. Kiryu's about to step in to help her, but then the foreigner from before comes in and tells us to just wait and see what she does. And she just goes ham on the guy. Which inspires Kiryu's beast style of combat. The most defining aspect of Kiryu's beast style of combat is that it is very slow, like super slow, like just slow. Because Kiryu's beast mode is so slow, it in turn means that he hits like a bus going at 10 miles per hour, a very powerful force you don't want to mess with. The style mostly revolves around wide swings, which you can actually charge up to do even wider swings and sometimes twirl around, except it's a very dangerous and heavy twirling. And then you can just hit him with a bus, just a straight bus. Kiryu's beast mode is also one of the only styles when you grab an enemy, you actually throw them. Like just straight chuck them. He also doesn't block. He just straight up doesn't block. When he's in beast mode, he just puts his hands out and just takes all the punishment that comes at him like a straight banger. Despite all that, beast mode's most important attribute has not been discussed yet. Beast mode's most powerful move is to be able to grab things from the environment instantaneously once you hit the button if you're near them and just swing them, just go woo! You can also pick up super heavy objects like motorcycles so that you can like tranquilize opponents, unconscious them. Despite all these great things, I would say that beast combat is my least favorite out of Kiryu's styles. It's just a little bit too slow and I just prefer the more speedy and balanced way of the other styles. But it's still tons of fun in a crowd, because when you're in a crowd you hit like 7 dudes at once, and you could just take out 10 dudes on a shopping cart. That is your boss. That wraps up the mechanics and working of the beast combat. Now let's get back to the story. After the beast mode tutorial, the lady thanks you for your help. And after some negotiations with the foreigner, you actually managed to get her to agree to train you under the beast mode style so you can become an even bigger beast. And now that we have all of our combat trainers introduced, I believe it is time for me to delve more deeply into what they're all about. Starting with the brawler trainer, the foreigner man, Bactus. Something to keep in mind about all the trainers is that in order to learn a move, you need to reach that move in the spear grid. So you need to unlock all the moves that come before that move so you actually have access to learn said move. Once you do this with the brawler style, the training consists of helping Bactus with his debt by defeating his assassins using the moves he teaches you. Go out of your way to learn everything because every single move is useful. All of this training is optional, but don't treat it as such because if you want to be really good at the combat, these are some valuable moves you can't miss. And speaking of that, that moves on to the rush trainer, the homeless fisting artist. The fisting artist training is a bit more complicated, but also simpler. Let me explain. So basically what a fisting artist is a guy who gets money from people who want to punch him. He pretty much goes out and says, I can't be punched. And then the guy's like, oh, I can punch you. And if he actually manages to punch the fisting artist, he'll get $100. But if the fisting artist dodges his attacks, he'll get $100. Now how this applies into the training is that now you get to do that. Before you can participate in the training though, you have to pay up because it is a bet. So both people are paying and the one who wins takes it all. So the prices keep going up and up as the training gets harder and harder. So you gotta have some fat stacks on you and you need to have those moves unlocked like I said before. All of the training sessions is just you dodging a guy's attack. And the trainer which you're training with usually will tell you a certain move you can do to dodge it better or improve your abilities. And now that I'm done talking about the fisting artist, I'm gonna move on into the beast mode lady, the debt collector. Beast! Now the training for beast mode is the one that requires the most hassle out of all of them. Like first off, the training takes place at the pier. Man, you gotta take a taxi to go to the pier. It's too far away to walk. Instead of just doing a single training session to learn a move like the other two, for beast mode, you need to do even more. First off, you need to do 2 sessions of a challenge where you beat up mannequins and have to get a certain amount of money in a time limit. These aren't too hard, but they're exhausting to do because you actually have to learn something. You need to do 2 of these to act as an actual learning session, which boils down to helping her beat up dudes with debt. Once you complete a learning session, you will actually learn a new move. It takes quite a bit of hassle to learn new moves in beast mode, but I understand it because, man, some of these moves are so overpowered, like wow, they did not think of balance when making these moves. But overall, no matter how you do it, no matter if you brawling, rushing, or beasting, train, because training is good. Now let's get back to the story. So a little bit up the block where you met Beast Lady, you'll find a store owner being hassled by a Yakuza about Tachibana real estate. The Yakuza threatens the store owner, but then Kiryu steps in and then the Yakuza just straight up loses and leaves. So Kiryu asks the store owner where Tachibana could be, and the store owner replies, he's actually kicking out some people over at a tenement nearby. You go over to that tenement and see that all of them have been bought out somehow, except for one. And that is where Kiryu searches for his answers. You go over to the last unbought tenement and you meet a man who is very scared and asks if you're part of the Jinsen family. Now, who is the Jinsen family? Well, they're a low-tier Yakuza group that Tachibana has just straight been kicking to the curb because now they can't actually get any of their properties because Tachibana is such a big boy that he's gonna get them from them. Kiryu, however, is not part of this group because Kiryu is actually strong. So after a while, the owner calms down a bit after seeing that Kiryu only means well and wants information, and then tells him about what exactly Tachibana's been up to. Now, the owner of the bar has his whole family living there. We don't see them, but we actually do hear a baby crying in the background. So if they get kicked out of this tenement, they don't have anywhere else to go. They'll be out on the streets, a whole family. To make matters worse, there's a bunch of homeless people in the hallways of the hotels, which are just causing havoc, just screaming, peeing, just doing whatever to discomfort the people living there. and they're paid by Tachibana to do so they can actually buy those properties from them. While Kiryu and the store owner are discussing these issues, one of Tachibana's main agents shows up, Oda. While Tachibana did show up personally to Kiryu, this isn't how he normally does things. He works through agents because he's a secretive man, like using the homeless or using this fellow here named Oda. Now, Oda remarks to the owner of the bar that Tachibana Real Estate has already bought the building. All things considered, they shouldn't be there because it's not their building. The owner doesn't budge though, so Oda decides, alright, here's some money. And then here's some money from the Yakuza group, which I forgot the name of. And then here's some more money just to be nice. The owner still doesn't budge. In fact, he's somewhat offended that he thinks that Oda can just slap money in his face and think that he'll be won over. So then Oda proceeds to literally slap money in his face and tell him off for being ungrateful.
見えすぎた芝居しやがって。金の問題じゃなかったら何の問題だ。こら！
Kiryu is obviously offended by what's taking place here because how can Oda act so brash towards a man living with his whole family here, and if he gets kicked out, where is he gonna go? But what Kiryu doesn't know is the slimy undercurrent of what's really happening here. Once Oda leaves, the store owner starts frantically picking up the money which Oda slapped in his face, and then he looks at Kiryu and remarks,
出てけと言われてさっさと出てった連中はバカだ。辛抱を重ねりゃこういうボーナスが出てくるってのによ。
Kiryu just stands there and watches the man drown in his greed as his baby wails in the background. Kiryu steps outside and sees that there's only one homeless man, so he asks him, "Where are the rest of your friends?" Which then the homeless man says, "Oh, they're on the other jobs Tachibana gave us." And then Kiryu's like, what is Tachibana? Who is Tachibana? What is this? The homeless man replies that Tachibana is quite a shadowy figure, something we already know. But then he tells us that Tachibana has actually managed to have a Yakuza's pinky cut off just by revealing information he knew. That's pretty scary. And then he leaves. Kiryu's goal is straight away. The two connections which Kiryu knows about Tachibana is the homeless men and Oda, and it's quite obvious which one's the correct choice. This objective will lead you to some homeless men who point you in the direction of other homeless men who, in order to get information from them, you're gonna have to endure a bit of a tedious fetch quest. So these homeless men you meet up with have all worked for Tachibana in the past before, and they're willing to give you information about him, but you need to buy them drinks first. They want some of that good alcohol, but here's the thing. Every different homeless man wants a different drink. From alcohol to sake to Burger King, I mean, they just gotta get it. The annoying thing with this objective is that you can't just buy all of these alcohols at one exact store. They're all over the map at different store chains, and it can be kind of confusing, and yeah, it's just gotta run around, man. The only real positive with this is that it'll give you time to interact with this game's many kooky side quests, which I'll get a little bit more in depth with later, but other than that, it's a bit tedious. Once you complete the alcohol quest for the homeless men, they'll tell you that they pretty much get paid to be a nuisance at certain places that Tachibana assigns them to, and that if he's looking to find any crew of Tachibana, to pretty much hit up the Champions District. So that's where we will go. So Kiryu heads over to the Champions District and enters an empty lot, no, not the one important to the story, and confronts some Yakuza-hating locals. And even though he's not Yakuza, he very much looks like a Yakuza, and they try to fight him. And of course, they end up losing. So once Kiryu has beaten up these locals, he tries to get some information about Tachibana out of them, but they won't budge because unlike the tenements which Tachibana has used his agents to force out, Tachibana is actually protecting the locals' properties here from the Yakuza. They have a huge respect for Tachibana, and they're not going to sell him out. And they wouldn't really have a chance to sell him out because before they can say anything, Oda actually shows up. So Oda asks Kiryu why he's digging up all this information about Tachibana, and Kiryu pretty much tells him that his boss, Tachibana, pretty much asked him to work for him. And Oda's pretty confused by this, so he calls him up and yeah, it's true. Crazy, right? Oda tells Kiryu to go to the place where he last met Tachibana, and also tells Kiryu the reason why they treat the Champions District so well. Basically, the people here in the Champions District are some of the first people in Kamurocho, so Tachibana sees it not fit to meddle in their affairs as newcomers. The reason they're so forceful with other places is because, well, they're kind of corrupt. I mean, you saw that man, he was pleading, but in reality he just wanted money. And think back, how did they get those houses? They probably did similar things as to what Oda did to him. Whoever Tachibana is, he is quite the interesting character, and Kiryu's about to find out exactly what type of man he is when he goes to meet him. Kiryu enters the building where he last met Tachibana, but what he sees there is a bunch of thugs waiting to beat him up. Kiryu doesn't know why he's receiving such an attentive crowd, but he has no way out of this. It's fight time. You're dealing with quite a huge group of enemies in a rather small room, so you gotta be quite careful or else you might die. And you get to beat up all these enemies while listening to a heavy track. Once you manage to beat up all those goons, you ascend to the top floor and see Oda. And Oda's whole excuse for this is, well, you see, I was just testing you. Despite having the boss's approval, Oda just didn't see you as working with him. And yeah, you did manage to beat up those goons, but now Oda wants a crack at you. So now, it's time for a boss fight.
だったらお互い手加減はいらねえな。そのつもりでかかってこい。
This is a pretty good fight with a menacing track in the background, which sets the mood quite nicely. Oda's got a few neat combos with a few tricks up his sleeves, and you can't just block all of them. You have to learn how to dodge. Oda also has a super move which has a nice build up to it, so you have enough time to dodge. So if this super move hits you, you'll only have yourself to blame. An interesting thing about Oda's boss fight is that he has no QTE transition into his heat mode. He just kinda does. Once Oda's at half health, he's in heat mode and he's got a super cool aura like every other boss in this game. One annoying element about Oda's fight is that he uses a weapon to fight like a coward. This doesn't break the fight or make it annoying because you should be fine as long as you're attentive. The stage you're in has a nice mood to it. You know, you're in this nice penthouse and it has quite a bit of furniture, chair, vases, couches. It's a really great setting for a fight. In due time, you do manage to beat up Oda and he's just on the ground wondering how he lost. He's just kind of in a bit of shock. And Tachibana actually shows up and is like, well, is he good? The situation that's happening here is that Oda didn't consent to Tachibana's decision to hire Kiryu, so Tachibana allowed Oda to do this test so that he could have his approval because he actually respects Oda to such an extent that he would do such a thing. Kiryu doesn't take too lightly to being tested like this though, and asks Tachibana for some straight answers, and Tachibana responds by causing a district-wide blackout. But after causing this spectacle, Tachibana explains that he wants to get rid of the control the Yakuza have over this city, and a big helper in his plans is Kazuma, Kiryu's foster father. The big secret which Kuze wanted Kiryu to spy on Kazuma to figure out is Tachibana, because he's the one who can actually locate the owner of the empty lot. That isn't the craziest reveal here though, because apparently everything that's happened so far has been part of Kazuma's big plan. Kazuma knew that Kiryu was going to get into trouble while he was in prison, so he appointed Tachibana as a help for Kiryu in times of need. So basically Kazuma is all-knowing and omnipotent, and omnipresent, and omniscient, and is God. Given this information, Kiryu asked the question, well, if he's so all-knowing, why is he in jail? Tachibana responds that him being in jail is probably part of the plan as well.
Given these outrageous claims, Kiryu wants some actual straight proof that Tachibana is actually working with Kazuma. But Kazuma is all-knowing, so he had something prepared for that. A watch containing a picture of Kiryu and Nishiki alongside Kazuma from their days in the orphanage, a valued possession. This proves to be enough to convince Kiryu to join Tachibana's side in this conflict. And there, the chapter ends. The first time I played through this chapter, it was rather engaging and the mystery was gripping, but on a second playthrough, it's a bit tedious. And that's mostly because of that certain homeless fetch quest in the middle. But other than that, not as strong as the start as the first chapter, but it does its job well. There is a great boss fight at the end, so all is excused. I recommend doing some of the side quests you come around town. That does help the experience quite a bit and will help you later on in the game. But now, this game has 2 protagonists. So how do they split it up? Well, after every 2 chapters, the game will switch protagonists, and wow, we've just gone through 2 chapters. Time to switch!